Hey, welcome to Business 101, the online edition, as we start out our new mode of delivery through video content. And we're going to dive into now Chapter 8 as an introduction to leadership. This is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, so I hope that this introductory lecture will provide some information as well as a trajectory for us to move forward as we start to explore this content from Chapter 8. Let's start out just asking a simple question for all of us who work, all of us who are currently employed or will be employed soon at a local employer. And the question is very, very simple. You see it there on the screen. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend our organization to your family or friends? Now, you're probably very, very familiar with this question, phrased to you not as an employee, but you probably encountered it as a consumer after you've purchased a product or service. The company who has sold you the product or service follows up with a survey of some sort, basically asking you a question like this, right? That's known as a Net Promoter Score survey to find out who is so delighted with the product or service that you'd recommend it and pass it on. However, this version for employees is called the eNPS score, or the Employer Net Promoter Score. And as you can see here, the question has been slightly tweaked to ask directly to our employees, how satisfied are you? How proud are you? How engaged are you with our organization? Are you so engaged that you would actually recommend our organization to your family and friends? Well, the way that we collate the results when we take these kinds of assessments of our employee base, you can see on this next slide. The way we typically look at it, as you can see, anyone rating from 1 to 6, well, those are our detractors. In other words, they have significant reasons why they would not recommend our organization to family and friends. Anyone who rates in the 7 to 8, we sort of ignore. We look at them as passives. There are things going on, but they're not really affecting their relationship to the company enough where we rate them as detractors. But the ones we're really looking for, as you can see here in the green, those who would rate the company in a 9 or 10, you are 9 or 10 out of 10 likely to recommend the organization to family and friends. We know those as actual net promoters. And so the Net Promoter Score formula you see at the bottom of the slide there, take the percentage of promoters minus the percentage of detractors times 100 to get a percentage, and that's what we're using to assess how engaged are our employees with our organization. Now that you sort of know the formula, what are the typical results? Well, as you can see here on this slide, the current state of employee engagement as of the end of 2018, which is when we have the last bit of data that I was able to find, only 34% of U.S. workers are actually engaged. That happens to be the highest in history that the Gallup poll folks who have been taking this survey. That's still pretty abysmal, right? That means only 1/3 of employees are actually engaged in their work. In fact, 13% of them are actively disengaged. In other words, they're miserable. In fact, they're so miserable, it's possible that they may be trying to actively sabotage things at work. That's how miserable they are. And finally, that means that over half, 53% of employees in the United States are not engaged. What does that mean? Well, specifically, that means they're not cognitively or emotionally connected to their work or their workplace. They will typically show up to work and do the minimum required, but they'll quickly leave their company for a slightly better offer. This may describe some of our previous work experiences, or heaven forbid, it might actually describe some of our current work experiences. And this is how I want to frame our ongoing discussion about leadership in business today. Leadership is indeed leading people. And if this is the state of our people, 1 out of 3 are engaged, 2 out of 3 are not, and clearly half of our employees, more than half, are not engaged. Well, we've got some room to improve as leaders in business today. Well, I want to give a positive example for us to sort of square up. This is a gentleman, Tom Walter, who I've actually met and chatted with at a conference in St. Louis, Missouri several years ago, and he wrote this book, It's My Company Too. I think I may have given you this anecdote in class before, but when I first met Tom, he told me what work looks like at his company, a company in the Chicago, Illinois area known as Tasty Catering. Tasty Catering is a company that has a very, very strong employee engagement, very high degrees of employee ownership and loyalty. And as a result, he told me this story of It's My Company Too, where they, for a long time now, have had employer values, company values that are ingrained into folks, and that's why they show up, because they resonate with the values, convictions, and principles that this company runs on. And one of those is to treat all people with respect. And he tells a story. Because they're a catering company, they hire a lot of summer help, college students, to help load up these large catering trucks when they're about to be loaded up with food and off to an event. And on one occasion, one of the managers, actually short-tempered, feeling a little frazzled, noticed that one of the employees, one of the college employees, had taken all of the product for a particular event and loaded it into the wrong truck. Now, this is a big problem because it means it's all got to be unloaded, loaded in the correct truck, and this is a huge expenditure of time, resources, labor, etc. This manager blows his top, starts yelling at this kid and taking him to task. And one of the other managers who spies this calls that manager out of the truck, points to the sign of the wall of the company values and says, "Is this reflective of principle number 2? Principle number 2, treat each other with the utmost respect." The manager who's been called out drops his head and says, "You're right, it's not." Goes back in the trailer, takes the kid, and he says, "I apologize. I should not have spoken to you this way. This is not reflective of who we are as a company or the values. I need to work on that. Let's get to work fixing this problem, and then we can talk about how we prevent it in the future. But I'm sorry for treating you that way." Now, that's remarkable in and of itself, isn't it? Well, Tom tells a story because he's been standing in the corner of the warehouse witnessing this entire exchange. And so he calls Raul, the manager who basically called the offending manager on the carpet, calls Raul over and pulls out of his pocket $40, says, "Man, I don't know what else to do, but I just want to give you a bonus right now for upholding our company values." And here's the interesting reaction. This gentleman, Raul, looks at the 40, gives it back to Tom and says, "I don't need this because this is my company too." That's where the title of this book comes from, you see? Why do I tell you this story? Because Tasty Catering is an example of the kind of corporate culture I think we would all aspire to have. We'd all love to work at a company like this. Why do I say this? Because Tasty Catering has been awarded year after year the best caterer in the entire United States. They have been they've received awards as the best workplace in the entire U.S., the best company to work for in the U.S., the most psychologically healthy workplace in Illinois, the most psychologically healthy workplace on the entire United States. This is the kind of corporate culture we would all love to work in. That's a result of leadership. That's a result of great leadership. And so in this chapter, as we begin to look at this very, very important content about leadership, and that will span not only chapter 8, but chapter 9 as well. One of the things to be a great leader is to understand what makes your people tick. What makes our people work? What do they want? what motivates them, what makes people bring their very, very best to work, what makes people then be the very best version of themselves at work. And as a result, think about it. If our employees bring their very best version of themselves to work, what can happen as a result in terms of performance, profitability to the organization, happiness, joy, loyalty, creativity, innovation, trust, stability, longevity, all of these kinds of things. You see, all of this rests on leadership. Now, I'm going to post up a short little link, a link to a short little YouTube video that Tom Walter actually hosts as for a quick impromptu tour of some of the elements of Tasty Catering. I'd like you to take a look at that, and we may chat about that in a future quiz. But for the meantime, take this as our introduction to the topic of leadership as we begin looking at Chapter 8. Thanks so much. We'll see you in the next lecture.